Welcome to the Bitcoin Beat with Shaun and Jeff. I'm your host, Shaun. Jeff, unfortunately, is not with us today. We actually tried to get connection issues worked out. He's on the road right now. He was trying to tune in and record an episode with us this evening. Did not get permission to share this, but I'll show you. He is sunburned beyond belief. And there's his little puppers talking about some of the recent Bitcoin news. So yeah, it'll just be us today. And again, congratulations, you get me. So a few things that we wanted to cover, Jeff and I were talking about some of these topics, and we have different takes on a couple of them, which I'll share with you. But in reality, it's more just talking about some of the current news, and you want to make your own opinion on what you see here. But obviously, one of the key things that I always like digging into, and Jeff puts a lot of time and effort into these. This is the latest update regarding the gold to Bitcoin tracker. Now, he did something a little bit different. So when he started this, we were focusing on just February 28th when the conflict in Iran kicked off. There was a clear change in sentiment when it comes to Bitcoin as it relates to gold. People were selling gold and buying Bitcoin. And the spread continued to grow week after week after week. I think it even hit up to 30 or 34% swing. But what he looked at now is something that's a little bit more interesting because of the recent sell-off in Bitcoin and a couple other things. What's interesting is the NASDAQ is what's going up. That's the strongest performer that's happening right now. People are buying tech, growth, AI, which is the NASDAQ story in a nutshell. If you go down here to his chart, this is impressive. This is the Bitcoin in orange, where it just kept going up and up and up, where gold kept going down, 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 and it's still performing pretty poorly. But in the last few weeks with this sell-off in Bitcoin, we can see the NASDAQ and even to some degree the S&P 500, the market in general, hasn't been coming down as fast and as hard as Bitcoin has, which is interesting. Jeff surmises he has a really key point in this post here where he thinks Wall Street doesn't understand what's going on. Is it risk on or is it risk off? What if it's actually neither? And it's an interesting post. We talk about all the things that we believe in Bitcoin and what it does and what it fixes. But maybe this is indicative that they don't really know if it's risk on or risk off. And they're trying to use old models to really show what Bitcoin does when Bitcoin breaks all those models. It doesn't really even belong in the same kind of conversation as an asset class with all these other legacy markets. It's interesting. He says that may be the opportunity here. Definitely check that out on his page. If you don't follow both of us, do. His is at Jeffrey Teef. Check that out when you get a second. I think that's pretty interesting. We dig into that. In the past, we would always expect in times of turbulence, a lot of uncertainty, especially on war footing, that people would want to hoard gold. That's kind of the risk. That's the best risk adjusted thing to get into. And we've seen that in the past, except now something is different. That's not what people are doing. They are not shoveling in gold. So that's something we'll keep an eye on. I look forward to next week. Jeff will be back on the show and we'll dig into that a little bit more deeper in the nuance because that's something that he covers a lot. The Galaxy, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy of the Universe, when they asked the question for the answer, what is the meaning of the universe? What's the meaning and the answer of everything? The answer was 42. Well, it turns out they were wrong. The answer, according to Michael Saylor, is actually 32. So they had this post, Michael Saylor on Sunday, put 32 question mark. And so everybody is trying to guess, what does that mean? Is he buying 32 Bitcoin? That'd be a pretty insignificant amount. Is he buying 32,000 Bitcoin? That'd be pretty epic. That'd be a lot of hopium, a lot of bullishness there. What is it? Well, it turns out he just shared Strive. They probably had some kind of backdoor channel where they talked about what they did. Strive acquired 32 Bitcoin, which bring them up to 19,032 Bitcoin total. And they have a product similar to Stretch with SATA. And it's interesting that there's some small differences between those two companies, Strive and Strategy, but the preferred equity, stock that they have here, which is paying a slightly higher return on capital than Stretch is, there's only small differences. They're pretty much the same product. So they've been posting each other's content quite a bit. So, all right, we get you, Michael. That's what you're posting on, right? Well, here's the key thing. So they announced they had purchased 1,550 Bitcoin. Notice they didn't put all the same stats they used to. They used to put in what the average price was and a couple other metrics. This is a slightly different post than they normally do. But if we go back to the thing I like following is, are they going to hit 1 million Bitcoin this year, or will it be next year or later? And with the purchase this week being a lot smaller, 1,550, and last week being a negative, net negative, where they sold 32. That's 2 weeks in a row where they weren't averaging their 8,000 to 9,000 per week for 2026. So the new metrics are actually adding up to look like for 2026, they've purchased 172,788 Bitcoin, which is a weekly average of 7,607. So using that number from where they're at now, which they have a total of 845,256 Bitcoin, they will hit 1 million Bitcoin as a company on October 28th, 2026, October of this year, which is coming up to be right around Halloween again. So it's kind of been fluctuating between September and October, depending on how much they purchase. I'll keep following this. I find it pretty interesting, but we'll see what they do. We'll see what's coming up. We do need to check in with our resident Bitcoin expert, Peter Schiff. Peter, Big Peter, was calling for a Black Monday. So he was gloating when Bitcoin dropped below 60, and it had just tagged this number here. And he claims if today's low is taken out, which over the weekend it was, prepare for a crypto Black Monday. Well, Bitcoin's up pretty substantially on Monday. It was not a Black Monday. It was a pretty green Monday. So, wrong again, buddy. And our good friend Fred Krueger likes to call this out. Peter Schiff was wrong again. Of course, somewhere here I think Peter was asking, oh, I can't find it now. I'm probably scrolling through a whole bunch of hate comments, but there was one here where Peter Schiff was like, where? What was I wrong with? So, yeah, interesting, right? That's Peter Schiff for you here. I do want to mention something that's interesting. Last week, Andrew Tillman, interview we had with him a couple weeks ago, talked about the Midwest Bitcoin Summit. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It was a really great interview with the CEO, the guy that's launching this conference. But he's now doing an X Space every Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Arizona time. So that's 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 fake Central time. I don't know. All these other states, you guys change time twice a year. Like somehow you can alter time. 5:30 Eastern. Figure out what time that is in your area. And Andrew's hosting the space. We had one last week. It was actually quite interesting. Andrew's not big on X or social media in general. He had some help from Chad Chartle. Him and I work on some of the Bitcoin Today stuff, and he's an interesting character, but he understands X Spaces, so he's helping him host this. So I believe he might be back on for this next Wednesday here on the 10th. But I'm asking you, if you're interested in the conference, come check it out. Just hop in the X Space for a little bit. It's a great space for Andrew to not only give us updates on what's happening with the conference, whether it's speakers, the venue itself, the stages, just other updates that are happening, whether it's merchants, onboarding, and just things going on. It's a pretty good space to kind of get updates on a weekly basis. Come check it out, ask some questions, learn something. Definitely, if you haven't decided yet, get off the fence and get a ticket and make plans to go down there. I personally was looking at some of the hotels in the area, and it's actually the Columbus Greater Columbus Arena, whatever they call that right there, is actually a pretty great venue because they have hotels all around there, and they're all decently priced. None of them are, they're not obviously the Vegas price or Miami Beach price, but they're also a little bit cheaper than they are in Nashville for the Bitcoin Magazine conference. So it's pretty affordable to be able to do that. So take a look at it, but definitely check the space out. I'll toss a link to this space in the show notes in the description below, so you don't need to search for it if you're not, already following the people that host this. But that's a pretty interesting thing I wanted to let all of our viewers know about. And Jeff might jump into that too if he has some time on Wednesday as well. So get a chance to chat with us about it too. One of the last things we were going to wrap up talking about is some thoughts around more macro for the markets in general. People are always wondering when price moves one direction or the other. We try to find a narrative to explain that. But more importantly, Bitcoin is on a different path than all these other legacy financial instruments. But one thing that I think is coming up that's going to be at least worthwhile for Bitcoiners to watch, even if it's just to follow it, you're not looking to invest in it or even understand the nuances of it. It's definitely something that's never happened before in the markets as a whole. And that's these IPOs coming out in the stock market. AI is one of the hottest trends right now. It's one of the things talked about the most, not only on like legacy mainstream media, but all over X. And AI is the hot button right now. And I'll be honest with you, it doesn't really matter if you think it's a bubble or it's not. It's something you got to watch. So the biggest IPO to ever come out, if you take away like the Saudi Arabia, Amco, it's basically a country with a bunch of oil IPOing. You take that one out there, the largest IPO in history was for a company that had a valuation of $175 billion. And that's pretty big, $175 billion. SpaceX, with its XAI component, they're going to launch, I think later this week, I think Friday is when it IPOs, at $1.77 trillion. $1.77 trillion. The biggest IPO before that was a company that IPO'd at 0.175 trillion. That's massive, but that's not the whole story. Anthropic filed to do their IPO. They're going to be valued at just over $1 trillion as well later this year. And before the year's over, OpenAI has already filed or already given intent to file their IPO for the ChatGPT companies. And they're almost at $1 trillion right now. They're definitely going to be over $1 trillion when the IPO. So here we have 3 massive companies valued at over $1 trillion entering the public market, all in the second half of the year. And we've never even seen one of these type of things happen once in the market. And now we have 3 of them happening. It gives a lot of credit and credence to some of the things we've been talking about the last few weeks on some of the spaces where a lot of money is probably being taken off of assets in preparation to get a piece of this AI pie. Everybody wants a piece of AI to the point where there's only been proxies for it for the most part. You have NVIDIA. They're the picks and axes of the gold rush, right? They're the ones building the chips. Everybody wants to go into the NVIDIA, the Mag 7 stocks. But honestly, we're going to be seeing capital roll out of all of these. Bitcoin, the crypto market, stocks, the Mag 7, even NVIDIA, gold, silver, even bonds. I mean, I don't think there's an asset class that's going to be untouched. That doesn't mean all that capital is going to go into these AI plays and they're going to go up. IPOs are a weird thing. Back when I was in stocks, I stayed away from IPOs. It seems like it was a good bet on my end to not get involved in those. I've always been a long-term investor when I was in stocks. But one of the key things about these IPOs, in more of a simplistic way to look at it, they're basically exit liquidity for early holders. Early holders that have made a massive amount of money that can't trade that and sell that in a liquid market easily. There's ways to do it. But once it goes public, it is easy to sell, take that profit, and actually start enjoying life, buy a yacht, buy another house. And people like you and me, when it's in the public, we now have the opportunity to then buy into it. And from what I recall in my stocks, anytime I was interested in the company and I watched the IPO, maybe not on day one, but usually in the first week, the first couple months, it tanked. Now, there's always some high volatility. It'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up and down, but generally it's almost always been something that went down in the short term. And I never was a short-term trader, so I still never really got into these. There was only one IPO where I didn't see that, and Google did not have a huge drawdown. And that was the only one that kind of statistically kind of just kept going up and up and up. So obviously it's something that I've always found on a personal note, something too dangerous, too speculative to get into on the initial public offering. But the key thing is we've never seen companies of this size in a market that is so focused on, hot, talked about, and we have 3 of those companies coming to market. Something the markets have never seen before, something to keep an eye on. You may have a different opinion than I do. It really doesn't matter if you think AI is in a bubble, or if you're in my opinion where I don't think it's in a bubble yet, but it could easily get there. Whether you think that or not doesn't matter, because the statistics are showing that this has never happened before. So that's all I want to impress on you. Jeff and I had a good conversation about that. I think that might be something we revisit later. Plus, obviously, the SpaceX XAI IPO will have come out by one of our next episodes. It's not specifically Bitcoin related, but it could also be affecting the short-term market for Bitcoin. And us Bitcoiners, we don't care if they're buying opportunities. That's an opportunity to buy more. It's not something that'll keep it down forever. So that's the show. Next week, we have a couple things that we're going to table that we were going to talk about this week for next week. One thing I did want to mention, Jeff and I were talking about this at length too, because we're discussing some things about the pod going forward. And I just want to mention on behalf of myself and Jeff that it's been 171 days since Keone reported to prison. He's one of the Samurai Wallet developers, and they're sitting in prison for writing code. And every week when we meet and talk about, what's going on in Bitcoin, their names keep coming up, and it's just not something we're willing to forget until they're actually free. So if you're out there, keep them in your thoughts. Check out their GoFundMe. Check out some of the things that the community is doing for them. We're going to bring some of those to light on future episodes, but we're thinking about them, and they shouldn't be in prison for what went on. So for right now, that's the show. Check us out next week. Our last interview has been posted. It was with Duncan, IMGPIO. He's a solo Bitcoin mining maker, creator. It was a good interview. We got sent these solo miners. See if I can, there you go, get a little bit of a view of Satoshi sitting in there. I'll getting it hooked up and connected, and we're going to have a follow-up episode where Jeff and I can both kind of go through that. It's actually kind of neat. But we want to thank Duncan for sending those, and it's a great interview. It's actually been one of our most viewed episodes so far as time watched. So he's an interesting guy, and it was an interesting conversation. Check it out. Do us a favor, support the channel. Follow us on X, follow us on YouTube. Take a look at that Midwest Bitcoin Summit. You'll get a chance to meet me and Jeff there, and a lot of other Bitcoin only people. It's going to be a great time. So until then, if you don't have any Bitcoin, get off of zero. But if you do have Bitcoin, keep stacking sats. See you next week when Jeff returns. Take care, everybody.